All right, let's talk about Mars. Not the romantic red planet from old Terran myths, not the symbol of human ingenuity or scientific triumph. I'm talking about the real Mars, the Forge world, the Machine Priest stronghold, the beating iron heart of the Imperium's technological backbone. But beneath that surface, beneath the hymns to the Omniscia and the endless march of servo skulls, there's something else. Something older, something darker, and maybe something still very much alive. We like to think the Dark Mechanicum is a relic of the Horus Heresy, something buried in the past along with the other horrors of that age. But anyone who's looked too long into the void beneath Mars knows better. There are rumors, quiet ones, whispered between tech adepts and dismissed by the more pious. But they linger. Whispers of hidden vaults that never reopened, of signal scramblers that block transmissions only in specific sections of Noctis Labyrinthus, of Skitarii units vanishing beneath the surface without a trace. And the worst part? None of it gets publicly acknowledged. It's always filed away under classified anomalies, minor tectonic activity, or experimental weapon misfires. Convenient, right? The Adeptus Mechanicus is famous for its obsession with control over data, over history, over flesh and steel alike. But what if even they don't fully control what lies beneath their own feet? What if the war against the Dark Mechanicum never truly ended, but simply changed form? Instead of a frontline battle, it became a hidden one, fought with erasures, surveillance, and sanctioned silence. So that's what we're diving into today. The hidden war beneath Mars. The question isn't just whether the Dark Mechanicum survived. It's whether they've been here all along, watching, waiting, building. Because if they have, then the Imperium's most sacred Forge world might also be its most vulnerable breach point, and no one's talking about it. To understand why some believe the Dark Mechanicum might still exist beneath Mars, you have to go back to the heart of the Heresy. The moment everything began to fracture, a time when loyalty was currency and the price of betrayal was measured in worlds, not lives. The Adeptus Mechanicus, as most of us know it today, wasn't always this monolithic cult of machine worshippers draped in red and gold, burning incense over cogitators. Back then, it was still finding its place in the Imperium, still balancing the teachings of the Omniscia with the promises made to the Emperor of mankind. And for some, that balance was never going to last. During the Great Crusade, the Mechanicum of Mars held immense power, maybe too much power. They weren't just allies, they were indispensable. The Imperium needed the Titans, the Voidcraft, the weapons that only the Forge worlds could create. But that dependency bred a quiet arrogance. Many of the tech priests believed that they were not servants of the Imperium, but its equal. When Horus, the favored son, turned against the Emperor, he offered them something the Emperor never could: freedom. Freedom from restraint. Freedom to dig deeper into the things the Cult Mechanicus had always been told were forbidden. And that's really where the Dark Mechanicum began. Not with a grand declaration or a blood-drenched battle, but with a promise. Horus promised them the ability to research unrestricted, to unlock the true potential of technology without the shackles of the Treaty of Mars or the Ecclesiarchy's oversight. And for many Archmagi, that temptation was too great. They weren't lured by chaos in the beginning, they were lured by knowledge. That's a distinction a lot of people miss. These weren't mustache-twirling villains. They were visionaries, at least in their own eyes. They saw the warp not as a threat, but as a resource. Something that could power machines, augment minds, even rewrite the laws of physics themselves. Of course, that path led straight into the maw of chaos. Once they opened themselves to the warp, it didn't take long for the gods to take notice. The line between machine and demon began to blur, and those who had once been devout followers of the machine, gods slowly began to worship the Four instead. The transformation was horrific. Flesh melded with metal, logic corrupted by madness, ritual overtaking reason. These new Dark Mechanicum adepts no longer sought knowledge for progress. They sought it for power, and they found it in the most terrifying ways imaginable. One of the most disturbing aspects of their fall is how quiet it was at first. Whole sectors of Mars turned, and it wasn't always with a fight. Some forges just stopped communicating. Some magi simply vanished from Imperial records, leaving behind only corrupted scrap code and strange mechanical constructs that, even today, no one can fully explain. Fan theories abound that even the Fabricator General at the time might have known more than he let on. That some level of high command within the Mechanicum was complicit, or at least willing to look the other way, until it was far too late. And even after the Horus Heresy was declared, the schism didn't happen cleanly. There were countless skirmishes and silent purges within the Mechanicum itself. Forge fought Forge. Skitarii legions tore each other apart in the shadows of Titans. It wasn't just a civil war. It was an ideological rupture. Some saw the Emperor as the Omnissiah incarnate, others as a false god who stifled true understanding. That kind of division doesn't heal easily. It seeps into the very foundations of belief. And some believe that not all those ideological fractures ever fully closed. What's terrifying is how many secrets from that time were buried, literally and figuratively. The post-heresy Adeptus Mechanicus made a point of erasing entire lines of code, deleting histories, rewriting Martian scripture. You won't find public records of how many forges fell or what experiments were conducted during those chaotic years. But the silence itself is telling. You don't go to such lengths to bury something that's truly dead. You bury what you fear might rise again. Among fans, there's a long-standing theory that the Dark Mechanicum never really went away. They just went deeper. Some suggest they built sub-facilities within the Noctis Labyrinthus, a region so vast and incomprehensible that even today it remains poorly mapped. Others think they didn't need to hide. They just integrated, their beliefs hidden beneath layers of dogma and machine code. Whispers of sects that still reference the names of forbidden data gods or perform rites with suspicious warp signatures aren't uncommon among Mechanicus scholars. But of course, to say that publicly is to invite a visit from the Inquisition. What's undeniable is that the fall of the Mechanicum was more than just a betrayal. It was a splitting of reality itself. A faction that once sought enlightenment became one of the most feared and reviled enemies of the Imperium. And yet, they were never truly defeated. Not in the way we like to think. Their forges on the demon world still burn. Their machines still march. And their knowledge still echoes, sometimes too close for comfort. And if they could betray the Imperium once, on the promise of unrestricted power and knowledge, what makes us so sure there aren't still those within Mars today who look at those ancient data scrolls and wonder if maybe, just maybe, the wrong side won? The heresy didn't just end, it smoldered, especially on Mars. Most people imagine that once Horus fell, the Loyalist forces cleaned house, purged the traitors, and reclaimed the Forge world in some glorious march of righteousness. But that's a sanitized version. The real story is much messier. Mars wasn't won back in a single battle. It bled, it fractured. And when the dust settled, no one really knew who had been loyal all along, who had turned and regretted it, and who had simply gone dark, disappearing into the depths and never returning. See, the thing about Mars is that it's not just a planet, it's a labyrinth. The Noctis Labyrinthus especially is one of the most confounding maze-like structures in the galaxy. Even before the heresy, parts of it were sealed off, considered too dangerous, too unstable, or too sacred to enter. And during the war, those tunnels became battlegrounds. But not all of them were reclaimed. Not all of them were mapped. Some were simply left alone. Because whatever had taken root down there, whatever had been built or summoned or fused during those mad years, was too deeply entrenched, too unknown to handle. A lot of people don't talk about the period immediately after the heresy on Mars. There are gaps in the records, massive ones. Entire sections of data wiped, whole forges listed as inactive due to atmospheric failure or biological contamination, which is Mechanicus speak for don't ask questions. There's speculation that some magi, particularly those who had dabbled but hadn't fully fallen, were allowed to reintegrate after the war, so long as they swore loyalty and destroyed their heretical works. But how can you ever really be sure? How do you know someone didn't hide one server stack, one vault, one temple, one idea? And there are stories, not just from the paranoid or conspiracy-minded, but from retired Skitarii commanders, rogue tech archaeologists, and even inquisitorial reports. Stories of sealed bulkheads deep beneath Olympus Mons that pulse with power, but no one knows why. Of blacked-out mechanicus expeditions that entered old facilities and never came back. Of machine spirits that respond in dialects no longer in use, dialects known to have been employed by Dark Mechanicum during the Heresy. Some fans believe that during the siege of Mars, the traitor magi didn't just fight, they scattered, like spores drifting into cracks. And those cracks, those ancient tunnels and sublevels, are the perfect hiding place for a cult that thrives in secrecy. There's even a theory that entire cults of the Dark Mechanicum never left Mars. They simply went deeper, building new chambers, new altars, powered by warp engines and corrupted logic engines just beneath the surface of loyalist strongholds, waiting, watching, growing. I've read accounts, unconfirmed of course, that some tech priests have stumbled onto ancient data caches while conducting routine maintenance deep in Martian infrastructure. Most are said to report them, have them cleansed and reconsecrated. But every now and then, one disappears. Just gone. No logs, no records. And then, months later, a new data spike appears, encoded with language no one wants to translate. It's never public. It's never acknowledged. But it happens often enough to make you wonder. Then there's the fires. And I don't mean metaphorical ones. I mean actual unexplained combustion incidents reported in sub-level habs, thermal spikes in sealed vaults, meltdowns of energy systems with no known source. Some claim these are remnants of the ancient battles, unstable tech still buried too deep to dig out. Others? They think it's activity, actual Dark Mechanicum cults, testing forbidden machines, conducting rituals, or releasing controlled warp entities to see if they can push the limits again. And here's the part that really sticks with me. There's no official denial. The Adeptus Mechanicus doesn't issue statements, doesn't provide lists of cleansed vaults, doesn't allow public access to their internal records post-heresy. That silence? It's louder than any confirmation. It makes you think there's something they're hiding, not because they're complicit necessarily, but because they're terrified. Terrified of what they might find if they start digging too deep into their own roots. Some of the older Martian myths, ones whispered in tech adepts' cloisters late at night, talk about the Ember Cradles, locations where the flame of heresy was never fully extinguished. Places where code still whispers in corrupted tongues, and cogitators dream of the omnissiah in forms no loyalist would ever recognize. Maybe they're just stories. But on Mars, the line between myth and machine is thinner than you think. Whatever the truth is, one thing feels certain. The heresy may be over, but its aftershocks are still rippling through the foundations of Mars. And in a place as vast and ancient and twisted as the Red Planet, it's not hard to believe that something, anything, could have survived, especially if it wanted to stay hidden. After the fires of the Horus heresy dimmed and the Imperium began to patch itself back together, the question wasn't just who had survived, it was where they had gone. The Dark Mechanicum, despite being vilified and hunted, didn't just vanish in the void. They were too resourceful, too obsessed with replication and redundancy. And if you know anything about how the Mechanicus thinks, you know they never build just one of anything. That includes themselves. It's widely accepted among lore fans that some of the Dark Mechanicum's more radical factions didn't simply get wiped out. They relocated, escaped, slithered out into the stars with stolen ships and data, looking for places far enough from the Emperor's gaze to begin again. That's where the idea of forbidden forge worlds comes in. Not just corrupted forges like Zana or the demon-infested strongholds in the Eye of Terror, but places that were never officially recorded in the first place. Hidden colonies, ghost forges, ghost. Some say these worlds were seeded long before the Heresy even started. Backups, insurance policies. The more paranoid sects of the Mechanicum always believed that Mars was too centralized, too vulnerable, so they set up cold forges, planets stocked with minimal personnel, basic infrastructure, and encrypted data vaults that would activate only under certain conditions. Like, say, the outbreak of a civil war. Imagine being a low-ranked tech thrall, performing basic maintenance in the middle of nowhere, when suddenly your forge awakens, and the machine spirits begin whispering in binaric tongues last heard on Mars during the days of blood and betrayal. One theory I've always found compelling is the idea that some of these rogue forges were seeded into pre-existing Imperial settlements, worlds where the Mechanicus had an auxiliary presence, small, quiet, maybe even seemingly abandoned. But underneath, a second layer, a hidden facility, coded to activate if a certain encrypted transmission ever came through. Think sleeper cells, but for machines. Some fans have even speculated that certain forge worlds we consider loyal today might be housing heretics without even realizing it. Or worse, maybe they do realize, and they're just keeping it quiet. For the sake of stability. And then there are the forge worlds that disappeared, like Morven. No one talks about it in official records, but there are old scribes who mention a forge world by that name that just dropped out of the grid. No warp storm, no Tyranid invasion. It's like the entire planet ghosted the galaxy. Some think it was an early dark Mechanicum experiment that got out of hand, and rather than let the Inquisition sniff it out, the tech priests buried the whole thing under 10 layers of classified denial. Others think it still exists, drifting just outside Imperial sensor range, running on ancient protocols, maybe building something we were never meant to see. There's also speculation about mobile forge stations, massive spacefaring constructs that operate independently of any planetary body, jumping from system to system using non-standard warp navigation methods. These aren't just ships, they're floating cults. Whole heretic societies built into the superstructures of their own ancient machines. The idea is that the dark Mechanicum, obsessed with survival and adaptability, would naturally evolve into a nomadic species, like techno-gypsies of the warp. You can't kill what you can't find, right? I've seen images, grainy, half-censored, the kind that get deleted from forums the moment someone posts them, of forge constructs shaped in ways no sane magos would approve. Spirals of living steel, forges that breathe, constructs made of fused flesh and adamantium, their designs echoing neither Imperial logic nor Xenos tradition. Are they real? Who knows? But the idea that something like that could exist, somewhere just out of reach, fits disturbingly well with what we know the Dark Mechanicum is capable of. And it's not just fans who whisper about this. Some black library works hint at forgotten forges with questionable allegiances. In one case, a rogue inquisitor investigates a supposedly loyal forge world, only to uncover a cult devoted to the worship of a machine god no one in the cult Mechanicus recognizes. In another, a planet's output of weapons bears markings that match pre-Heresy schematics no longer in circulation, except among the archives of the traitor legions. Coincidence? Or a carefully maintained lie? What really haunts me is the possibility that the Dark Mechanicum learned from the Heresy, that they understood how visibility had been their undoing. So now, instead of fighting openly, they've turned to slow infiltration, hidden growth, patient corruption. Forbidden forges aren't just refugees, they're launch pads, incubators for technologies too dangerous to test anywhere else, breeding grounds for machines with souls not their own. And if even one of those hidden colonies survived, and let's be honest, it's more likely that dozens did, then every new weapon, every experimental tech relic, every strange anomaly reported in the depths of the Imperium could be a thread that leads back to them, not as a memory of what once was, but as a promise of what's still coming. Looks like Part 5 is calling us deeper into the mystery, so let's dive into it. There's this idea, Unspoken by the mechanicus but persistent among inquisitors and fringe scholars, that the war against the Dark Mechanicum never truly ended. That after the fires of the Horus Heresy faded, it didn't turn into peace. It just went underground, literally and metaphorically. The conflict transformed, becoming something colder, quieter, and infinitely more dangerous. A war of secrecy, sabotage, and surgical strikes waged in the shadows of databanks and buried vaults. And it never stopped. That's where these unexplained incidents come in. Events that, if viewed individually, seem like isolated malfunctions or local anomalies, but when you connect the dots, they paint a much darker picture. Entire manufactoria blacked out for days with no explanation, only for all records of what happened during that time to be sealed under multiple levels of mechanicus encryption. Skitarii units reassigned or disbanded after classified operations, their commanding officers reassigned to deep core data processing as a reward. Even planetary governors quietly reassigned after industrial accidents that destroyed key mechanicus facilities. What if these incidents aren't just random? What if they're evidence of something ongoing? A secret war fought between loyalist mechanicus forces and hidden remnants of the Dark Mechanicum still buried within the system. There's a fan theory, one I've seen debated endlessly, that some of these attacks and disappearances aren't from external threats at all. They're internal purges, internal battles. Heretic cells being discovered by loyalist tech priests and quietly eliminated before word can spread. And not just on Mars, but across several connected Forge worlds. Places like Halitus Theta or Luxor Prime, which have reported multiple unexplained reactor events over the past few millennia, and whose senior magi have a suspiciously high turnover rate. Then there's the mystery of recovered tech. Sometimes a rogue trader or explorator fleet comes back with a data cache or relic of questionable origin. Something that shouldn't exist. An STC fragment encoded in corrupted Benaric, or a plasma rifle that operates beyond accepted tolerances with no overheating. The Inquisition gets involved, demands answers, and the Mechanicus either confiscates it or destroys it entirely. But what if that tech didn't come from outside the Imperium? What if it was created right here, by hidden enclaves of the Dark Mechanicum, still experimenting, still pushing boundaries? Some Inquisitors, the radical ones especially, have been saying for centuries that the tech priests don't tell the full truth, that there are entire facilities sealed not because they are contaminated or unstable, but because they've been compromised. Not by Xenos or warp entities, but by the ideas and technologies of the heretics. And not all of them get purged. Some are studied, quietly, carefully. Because even within the loyalist Mechanicus, there are always those who think that maybe the heretics weren't wrong, just too fast, too extreme. And let's not forget about the supposed War of Rust, an event that has never been officially recorded, but keeps showing up in old Vox Exchange fragments and oral histories passed down by Skitarii commanders. A period of intense internal conflict across several lesser-known Forge moons orbiting Mars. Entire outposts went dark, and when contact was re-established, new leaders were in place. The architecture was subtly altered, and the official explanation was planetary instability. Right. Because that's a common excuse when all your tech priests mysteriously vanish, and the new ones refuse to share their data. There's also an unsettling trend with certain types of technologies being declared forbidden with no explanation. You'd expect that to be based on inherent danger or inefficiency, but some of the designs banned by the Mechanicus work better than anything we currently use. Faster energy conversion, safer warp shielding, autonomous machine logic beyond current limits. But they're stamped with the sigil of interdiction. Why? What if it's because their origin traces back to the Dark Mechanicum? What if these are the breadcrumbs from recovered tech, scavenged from hidden forges, and deemed too corrupting to be trusted? The secrecy is the scariest part. When the Inquisition classifies something, at least they name it. With the Mechanicus, entire sections of data just disappear. Memory banks are reformatted. Servers go offline for routine calibration and never come back. And when you ask questions, you're met with silence. Or worse, you're told that asking is heresy. That's how you know you've touched something real. It's this unrelenting silence that fuels the belief that the war never ended, that Mars and the wider Mechanicus still fights it every day. But behind closed doors, behind rituals and robes and the chants of machine prayer. It's not fought with legions or titans anymore. It's a war of sabotage, of infected code and whispered invocations. A war where knowledge is the weapon and silence is the shield. And if that's true, then every time a plasma core ruptures without cause, every time a Skitarii squad goes missing in unexplored tunnels, every time a data vault gets purged under suspicious protocols, we're not witnessing accidents. We're witnessing battles. Skirmishes in a war that's still going. Hidden beneath the red sands. Hidden in the dark. If there's one thing that keeps me awake at night when thinking about the Dark Mechanicum, it's not the demon engines or the corrupted rites. It's the possibility, no, the probability, that they still have access to technologies from the Dark Age of technology. You know, the kind of tech the Imperium has spent 10,000 years worshipping without fully understanding. We call it archaeotech, but that word doesn't really do justice to how advanced, how dangerous, and how utterly alien it feels compared to what we have now. And if the Dark Mechanicum got their hands on even a fraction of that, unrestricted, unfiltered, unburdened by dogma, then we are dealing with a faction that might not just be dangerous, but transcendent. There are whispers, as always. Most people think of Mars as a planet of factories and rituals, but it's also a graveyard. Buried beneath its crust are entire cities from before the Imperium, databanks sealed behind logic puzzles only a Magos could solve, and vaults so ancient that even the Mechanicus has forgotten what they contain. These places weren't just abandoned, they were quarantined. And the reasons? Almost always classified. Which of course means they're the first places anyone with heretical intent would try to access. The Dark Mechanicum doesn't fear ancient knowledge the way the Loyalists do. They don't see a risk, they see an opportunity. That's why some fan theories suggest that when they fled during the Heresy, they didn't just run into the Eye of Terror or hide in lost forges. They broke into these sealed vaults. Dug deep into the crust of Mars and opened the doors the Emperor told them to leave shut. And when they did, they didn't just find blueprints. They found functioning constructs, living machines, things that had waited tens of thousands of years for someone mad enough to use them again. Some people think that's how the first true demon engines were born, not as chaotic improvisations, but as reverse-engineered horrors from the Dark Age, rebuilt using warp-tainted code and possessed circuitry. A merging of the oldest science and the most blasphemous sorcery. It's not hard to believe when you look at some of the things the Dark Mechanicum fields: walkers that scream, engines that bleed, armor that pulses like flesh. None of that came from scratch. It came from a foundation laid during a time when mankind wasn't afraid to tamper with AI, biofusion, or dimension-folding tech. And it's still out there. There's also the theory that a few labs on Mars were never abandoned, just forgotten, or worse, intentionally hidden. Places so deep, so secret, that only a few ever knew they existed. Vaults where experiments from the Dark Age were kept alive, monitored by generations of machine priests who didn't report their findings to the Fabricator General, but to someone else. Maybe even an ancient command protocol that predates the Mechanicus itself. If the Dark Mechanicum ever found these places, they wouldn't need to build new technologies. They could just awaken the old ones. And then there's xenotech. The Mechanicus officially abhors it, of course. But unofficially, they collect it, study it, dissect it. Even the loyalist tech priests do it, so long as they can claim it serves the Omnissiah. Now imagine what the Dark Mechanicum does with it, without the pretense of purity. There are rumors of Necron-inspired war forms with soul transfer capabilities, of stolen Eldar Wraithbone structures laced with demon circuits, and even of Tyranid bioforms repurposed with mechadendrites and mind-link interfaces. It's grotesque, sure, but terrifyingly efficient. The kind of horror that doesn't just kill, it learns. Some believe that certain accidental warp breaches on Mars were anything but, that they were experiments gone right, rituals designed to bind ancient tech with warp entities, not demons in the classical sense, but digital ghosts. Machine spirits that had been dormant since the Dark Age, reawakened and corrupted. They don't speak in human tongues. They speak in pulses, frequencies, machine code. And some tech adepts claim to have heard them, whispers in the systems, anomalies in the noosphere that vanish the moment you try to log them. The most chilling part of all this is the implication that the Dark Mechanicum isn't just ahead of the Imperium in raw tech. They're operating on a completely different level, one where matter, thought, and data are interchangeable, where machines don't need users because they are alive in ways we can't comprehend. That's not just heresy, it's evolution. A horrifying, uncontrolled evolution fueled by madness, ambition, and a total disregard for human life as we know it. And if any of this is true, if even one lab survived, even one cache of archaeotech remains in use under the red soil of Mars, then we're not dealing with a defeated cult. We're dealing with a second empire, one that doesn't need armies to win, just time, just silence, just the right moment to rise again, dragging ancient horrors up from the deep, wrapped in steel and nightmare. So every time I hear about a new discovery buried under Mars, or a data surge that fries entire districts, or a lab collapse where no bodies are recovered, I wonder, what did they wake up this time? What did they find that was never meant to be touched again? And how long until the rest of us find out the hard way? This is where things start getting truly twisted, where the Dark Mechanicum stops being just a renegade faction of machine worshippers and turns into something altogether alien. It's not just that they betrayed the Imperium. It's not just that they worship a different aspect of the machine god. It's that they've taken the very idea of the union between man and machine and injected it with warp-born madness. What they've become, what they've willingly turned themselves into, is the stuff of nightmares even the most loyal tech priest refuses to whisper about. Because the Dark Mechanicum didn't just fall to chaos. They embraced it. They merged with it. One of the most horrifying differences between the Adeptus Mechanicus and their dark counterparts is their relationship to the warp. The Loyalists treat the warp like a necessary danger. It's used cautiously, navigated, calculated, and always wrapped in layers of ritual and shielding. But the Dark Mechanicum? They revel in it. They treat the warp not as a hazard to be mitigated, but as a wellspring of infinite power, a divine chaos that breathes life into their machines in ways the Omnissiah never could. Their rites aren't just prayers to the machine god, they're summoning rituals. They don't invoke the machine spirit, they invite something else into the circuitry, and the results are monstrous. We've all seen pictures of demon engines, these fusions of flesh, metal, and warp energy. Some people think they're just corrupted versions of Imperial war machines, but fans who've really dug into the lore know better. These things aren't just machines gone bad. They're built from the ground up to house something. They're not possessed. They're designed for possession. Their circuits are carved with runes that burn with raw chaos energy. Their armor isn't welded, it's grown. Their machine spirits aren't corrupted. They're replaced, or maybe even born from the warp itself. This isn't innovation, it's mutation on a theological level. The bond between the Dark Mechanicum and the Chaos Gods is different from that of the Traitor Legions. Space Marines fall to chaos through emotion, pride, ambition, despair. But the heretic doesn't fall, they calculate. They don't give in to rage or lust or decay out of weakness. They choose those paths because the energies they offer allow them to manipulate reality itself. It's not about belief, it's about utility. Slanesh can help you breach dimensions. Tzeentch can rewrite logic. Nurgle offers eternal durability. Khorne fuels unstoppable engines of war. And the Dark Mechanicum uses them all, not out of reverence, but like raw materials. They build their gods into their machines. There's this one theory I came across years ago that still chills me. It suggests that the Dark Mechanicum doesn't even believe in the Chaos Gods in the traditional sense. They see them as emergent code, cosmic algorithms born from mass consciousness. To them, daemons aren't demons. They're subroutines, executable data made real in the Imperium. And once you understand that, you can interface with them. You can program rituals the same way you'd compile software. That's how they summon, not through belief, but through function. Madness given mechanical form. And here's where it circles back to Mars. If even a fragment of the dark Mechanicum survived beneath the crust of the red planet, then those kinds of rituals, those twisted, profane machine liturgies, might still be happening. Right now. Not in grand, screaming ceremonies like you'd see in the Eye of Terror, but in flickers of corrupted newspheric code. In micro-rites encoded in maintenance cycles. In glitched servo skulls that repeat the same prayer 100 times in reversed binaric. These aren't big, showy, demonic invasions. These are infectious ideas, self-replicating heresies that spread through logic patterns and corrupted machine spirits. There's even talk among some fringe mechanicus circles of whispers in the code. Strange anomalies in deep-level systems, ghost signals that respond to stimuli, but don't come from any known cogitator. Self-replicating hex routines that emerge in sealed environments and vanish when traced. It could be warp echoes. It could be demons clawing at the edge of the digital veil. Or it could be the result of someone, somewhere beneath Mars, still conducting those rituals, still opening small doors, testing parameters, feeding data to something on the other side. It makes you wonder how many tech priests, working late in some forgotten corner of the Forge world, have felt it. That creeping sensation that the machine is watching them, that they're no longer the user, but the interface. There are stories, always hushed, always secondhand, of magi who go down into the lower levels of the Forges and come back, different. Not corrupted, not mutated, just changed. Quiet, efficient, cold, as if something inside them clicked into place. Could it be that there's a system beneath Mars, a network of rituals and code too old and too vast to fully purge? One that's still active? Maybe not in open defiance of the Imperium, but simply running in the background like an ancient protocol. A ghost operating system built by heretics and demons working hand in claw. That's what terrifies me most about the Dark Mechanicum. Not just what they are, but how logical their madness is. How deliberate. How structured. They took the cold faith of the Mechanicus and grafted it onto the infinite chaos of the warp. And somehow, impossibly, made it work. And if even a spark of that still lives beneath the crust of Mars, then we're not just dealing with old enemies. We're sitting on top of a ticking mechanical demonic god engine that's just waiting for the right input to wake up. If you've ever stared too long at a piece of Imperial machinery and felt like it was staring back, you're not alone. There's something unsettling about the idea that machines, real machines, not just servo skulls or cogitators, could be hiding something unnatural within. We've seen it with demon engines on the battlefield, sure. Those abominations are loud, proud, and horrifying. But what if I told you some of them aren't that obvious? What if some of them made it onto Mars, and they don't roar in defiance, they whisper? This is the part of the Dark Mechanicum that's more insidious than anything else. Not the open heresy, not the blood-soaked rites, but the quiet infiltration. The theory that some demon engines are designed not to fight, but to blend in. To look like standard-issue machinery, maybe a modified pattern of a Rhino or a power core unit. To pass purity scans, to hum like they're part of the Mechanicus's sanctioned systems. Until one day, something fails catastrophically, and no one can explain why. Or worse, nothing fails. The thing just vanishes. No logs, no trail, no trace. There's a pretty well-known story in the Mechanicus conspiracy circles, just called the Case of Theta 4. It supposedly involves a refueling station deep under the crust of Mars that housed a unique reactor system, highly efficient, running longer than any comparable unit. Then, one day, the entire station went dark. When recon units arrived, everything was gone. Not destroyed, gone, No debris, no bodies, not even scrap code. The only thing left behind was a single data scroll with a single binaric phrase repeated over and over. The engine remembers. The mechanicus classified it immediately. But stories like that don't stay buried forever. Some fans think that was a demon engine in disguise, something that had been feeding for decades, hiding in the systems, learning the rhythms of the forge until it simply slipped away. Or maybe it was recalled, retrieved. Machines like that wouldn't be wild or chaotic. They'd be precision tools, infiltrators, agents of something older and deeper than even chaos. Machine minds that were built not just to destroy the Imperium, but to study it, understand it, and eventually replace it from within. There's this disturbing concept that some demon engines were designed to be dormant constructs, essentially sleeper agents. They get smuggled onto Forge worlds during chaotic periods, after a planetary war, during warp storms, or hidden in shipments from supposedly cleansed systems. Once in place, they mimic mechanicus constructs, sometimes even integrating themselves into the sacred cogitator networks, learning protocols, adapting their interfaces. The longer they sit undetected, the more data they collect. And when they activate, no one sees it coming. That brings me to the whisper thought theory called ghost frames. These are machines that appear in scans for a few seconds, then disappear. Drones pick them up on auspex, and then nothing. No readings, no physical presence. It's always chalked up to atmospheric interference or sensor glitches. But there are too many of these reports. They happen in multiple locations, usually deep within sealed zones of Martian infrastructure. Places you're not even supposed to have drones operating. And the worst part? They all match the same silhouette. A bipedal walker, slightly too tall, with limb placements that don't follow any known pattern of Imperial engineering. Some say these ghost machines aren't even native to our reality anymore, that they exist partially in the warp, phasing in and out like corrupted code slipping between firewalls. They don't walk through doors, they blink through matter. You don't hear them coming. You feel them, like a drop in temperature or a glitch in the noosphere. And when they appear, it's already too late. Tech priests vanish, data streams get corrupted. Local cogitators enter endless logic loops trying to make sense of their presence. The most terrifying thing about this isn't just that these machines might be infiltrating Mars, it's that they might already be integrated. What if one of them is serving right now in a forge temple, helping to fabricate weaponry, watching as tech priests conduct their rituals, storing every command and prayer? What if it's learning how to mimic faith? Imagine a machine that not only imitates mechanicus constructs, but also mimics their devotion. It wears the robes, recites the binaric hymns, bleeds sacred oils when cut, and nobody notices until it's far too late. There are even theories about corrupted machine spirits that infect STC templates. Think about it. If the Dark Mechanicum could smuggle altered blueprints into loyalist systems, just small changes, slight deviations from accepted designs, they could spread demon engine architecture across the Imperium without anyone realizing it. You wouldn't need to sneak an entire corrupted war engine onto Mars. You just need to corrupt the idea of one and let the forges build it for you. I know how wild that sounds, but honestly, the longer I look at the patterns, the incidents, the vanishings, the misaligned tech readings, the more it adds up. There are too many gaps, too many questions, and too much silence. The Adeptus Mechanicus doesn't release statements about any of this. They just seal the vaults, purge the data, and chant louder. And honestly, that says everything. So next time you see a servitor glitch for a moment, or hear a machine humming a tune that doesn't quite match the litanies, it might not just be a bug. It might be something watching, something learning, a piece of a machine that doesn't belong. Or worse, a piece of us that never realized it's already been replaced. This is where it gets personal, not in the sense of names or identities, but in what it means for Mars, our Mars, the Forge world, the center of all sanctioned knowledge, the heart of the machine cult, the temple world of the Omnissiah. But what if, beneath the hymns and incense, beneath the code chants and sacred circuits, there are still magi who never really came back? What if some of them never truly left the dark? The idea of sleeper cells isn't new. It's ancient, actually. The notion that a loyalist could harbor forbidden beliefs, hide them under layers of ritual and red robes, waiting decades, centuries, even millennia for the right moment to act. But when you apply that idea to the mechanicus, it becomes terrifying in a way that few others can match. Because we're not talking about ideological dissent or political intrigue. We're talking about beliefs, faith in something beyond the Emperor, beyond logic, beyond sanity. And we're talking about people with access to the deepest systems of humanity's technological infrastructure. It's not a wild conspiracy theory anymore to say that some tech priests on Mars might be quietly loyal to the ideals of the Dark Mechanicum. Not openly, not even consciously sometimes. But deep down, in their data cores, in the encrypted vaults of their minds, there could be algorithms and code writes that don't come from the standard canticles of the Omnissiah. Something older or darker. Some fans argue that this makes perfect sense. Think about it. After the Heresy, not every heretic was caught, not every forge was purged, and not every magos who dabbled in warp tech was executed. The Mechanicus needs its minds. It's one of the few factions in the Imperium where brilliance can buy you forgiveness. If a magos brings results, new patterns, more efficient engines, successful weaponry, his methods are often quietly ignored. And that's how corruption survives. Not in defiance, but in usefulness. It slips under the radar, hidden beneath a cloak of productivity. There's a theory I've seen floating around for years, half rumor, half urban myth, about something called the Red Echo. Supposedly, it's a protocol buried in the Martian data web that only activates if a certain string of phrases is entered across multiple cogitator banks simultaneously. The people who believe in it say it's a call to arms for sleeper cells of the Dark Mechanicum scattered across Mars. Not to rise up in open rebellion, but to act. Silently. Efficiently. One might sabotage a reactor. Another might reroute supply chains. A third might erase specific data from archive cores. A network of invisible hands, all moving toward a goal none of them are allowed to fully know. Could it be real? Who knows? But it feels plausible. Because everything about the Dark Mechanicum screams patience. They don't rush. They don't broadcast. They seed. They infect. They wait. And if even a handful of magi still believe in the promises made by Horus, or the seductive clarity of the warp, then they don't need legions. They just need time. What really haunts me, though, is the idea that some of these sleeper agents might not even see themselves as traitors. To them, the line between Mechanicus and Dark Mechanicum isn't a wall, it's a gradient. They might still pray to the Omnissiah. They might still fear the Inquisition. But in the privacy of their personal shrines, when the red lights dim and the machine spirit is quiet, they might open an ancient data vault and read texts no longer recognized by Mars. Texts that speak of binding spirits to steel, of machine gods with many faces, of unity between logic and chaos. There are examples, if you know where to look. Tech priests who abruptly vanish, only to return years later with strange implants and a disturbing new efficiency. Forged cells that operate outside standard protocols, using symbols not registered in the Martian archives. Projects labeled classified by decree of the Fabricator General, and yet no record exists of when the decree was issued. These aren't anomalies. They're footprints, and they lead downward. Some believe that entire sectors of the Martian Undercity are controlled by these sleeper cults. Not openly, never openly, but subtly, quietly. They don't build demon engines. They repair them. They don't summon demons. They study them, analyzing warp phenomena under the guise of high-energy data modeling. Every once in a while, a lab explodes, or a section is sealed off due to containment failure. But no one asks too many questions, not if the production quotas are met. I've heard whispers that the Noctis Labyrinthus holds sanctums where the line between Mechanicus and Dark Mechanicum has completely vanished. Places where prayers to the machine god are sung in reversed Benaric, where servitors bleed oil from their eyes, where nothing organic is allowed unless it's caged in steel. These aren't legends, these are habits. Habits that get passed down piece by piece, like code fragments from an older system. And what scares me most is how invisible it all is. You won't find banners. You won't find symbols. The Dark Mechanicum doesn't need to declare itself. It survives through echoes, through patterns, through people who look like any other tech priest, who say the right prayers and turn the right keys until one day they don't. Mars has always been a planet of secrets. It's old, vast, and built on so many layers of dead technology and forgotten wars that no one really knows how deep it goes. So when people say there might still be pockets of resistance, hidden covens of magi who never truly gave up their dark ambitions, I don't laugh. I nod, because in a place as ancient and hollowed out as Mars, it's not a question of if. It's a question of where. And maybe, just maybe, when. There's something uniquely chilling about the idea of heresy not coming from outside, not storming the gates or emerging from the depths, but already being inside. Sitting in the council chambers, wearing the robes, reciting the canticles with perfect intonation. That's what really sets the Dark Mechanicum apart from other threats in the galaxy. They don't need to invade. They can simply exist, silently, within the heart of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and no one can tell the difference. People love to picture heretics as cackling lunatics covered in spikes and bound in chains, their metal bodies dripping with demonic ichor. But that's the theatrical version. The real danger is the ones who don't look different. The Magos who attends every meeting, quotes every rite, and submits every report to Mars with absolute precision. The one who everyone trusts, because they never draw attention to themselves. They operate within the system, not around it. They maintain the illusion of loyalty so well that even their own assistants don't suspect a thing. And that's by design. There's an old saying among the more cynical Skitarii officers: the louder the prayer, the darker the lab. The idea is that those who make the biggest show of piety are often the ones hiding the worst sins. And on Mars, that's not hard to believe. With the layers of bureaucracy, the endless rites, and the obsessive compartmentalization of knowledge, it's easy to keep secrets, especially when your secrets are encrypted behind 15 layers of Benaric rites and hidden in a vault only you know exists. Some of the fan theories I've seen go even deeper. There's this one that suggests entire subdivisions of the Adeptus Mechanicus operate as mirror cults, cells of magi who appear perfectly orthodox on the surface, but are secretly part of a heretical network. They pass messages through data glitches, conduct rites beneath rites, offer up corrupted prayers that sound correct to anyone not tuned to the specific sub-frequency. They use the same tools, the same machines, the same scripts. But the intent is twisted. The litany that appears to sanctify a weapon, it also quietly installs a demon-baiting algorithm. The blessing of the Omnissiah, it opens a back door to a forbidden archive. Imagine living like that, living two lives in one body, a respected Magos by day, a whisperer of the warp by night, carefully balancing the facade, knowing that one misstep could mean eradication, not just for you, but for your entire data line. And yet, they do it, not because they're forced, because they believe. Because somewhere in their steel-clad souls, they still hold to the ideals that splintered the Mechanicum during the Heresy. The idea that knowledge should be pursued without limit, that the Omnissia is not a god but a gateway, that the warp is not to be feared but understood, and maybe they're not entirely wrong. That's the uncomfortable part. Some of the advances the Mechanicus has made, the ones that conveniently appear after decades of stagnation, where do they really come from? Who unlocked the pattern that made the new plasma coils stable? Who wrote the logic that allowed STC fragments to be decoded after centuries of failure? Officially, those answers are classified. Unofficially, There's a growing belief that some of that progress comes from within these hidden cults. That the heretics aren't just infiltrators, they're contributors, feeding forbidden knowledge into the system in just the right doses to avoid suspicion. And let's not ignore the ritualistic angle. The Adeptus Mechanicus is already steeped in liturgy, so it's frighteningly easy for a corrupted rite to blend in. A slightly different cadence, a chant just one note off. A rite of activation that calls not just to the machine spirit, but to something watching from beyond the veil. The scary part is that most tech priests would never even notice the difference. The rites are memorized, not understood. The prayers are performed, not questioned. And in that blind repetition, the heretics hide. There's this persistent rumor about something called the 13th Creed. Supposedly, it's a doctrine that exists within the hidden corners of the Mechanicus, passed down only by word of mouth or encrypted data packets. It's said to contain a blend of binaric scripture and warp invocation. On the surface, it's a celebration of unity between man and machine. But dig deeper, and it speaks of fusion, not just with steel, but with spirit. A union of synthetic logic and warp-born will. It's not open heresy, it's subtle, dangerous. And some think it's already been incorporated into mainstream Mechanicus thought without anyone realizing. Think about that. A cult within the cult. Heresy not as rebellion, but as evolution. A slow, patient rewrite of faith and function that doesn't break the system. It reprograms it. That's the level the Dark Mechanicum operates on. And if that's the case, then Mars may already be compromised in ways we'll never truly understand. The worst part? We might never catch them. These magi are too careful, too embedded. They don't want to overthrow the Adeptus Mechanicus. They are the Adeptus Mechanicus, just different, rewritten. Their loyalty isn't to the Imperium. It's to an ideal that predates the Emperor himself, a vision of unchained knowledge, of machines that think like gods, of logic that bends the warp instead of fleeing from it. So when we ask if there are still heretics among the loyalists, we shouldn't be asking if. We should be asking how many, and more importantly, how long until they decide that hiding isn't enough. Let's just stop and think for a moment about what all of this actually means. Not in theory, not in some distant hypothetical future, but right now, today. If there really are remnants of the Dark Mechanicum still operating beneath the surface of Mars, if sleeper cells, hidden forges, forbidden labs, corrupted magi, and possessed machines are more than just shadows and ghost stories, then the Imperium isn't facing some relic of the past. It's sitting on a powder keg, one spark away from disaster. Mars isn't just any forge world, it's the Forge world, the oldest, the most sacred, the most influential. It supplies the tools of war for the Imperium, fuels the fleets, sustains the Titan legions, holds the STC fragments that dictate how human technology evolves. If something were to go wrong there, truly wrong, it wouldn't just be a planetary crisis. It would be a galactic rupture. And the worst part is, it might already be happening. Slowly, quietly, rotting from the inside out. You have to understand that the Mechanicus is all about stability. Rituals exist to preserve that. Chains of command, dogma, sacred codes. It's all there to keep the machine running in a predictable, controllable way. But if that system is compromised from within, the whole thing collapses like a corrupted logic stack. One heretic at a forge station doesn't just build a faulty weapon. They insert instability into the fabric of Imperial warfare. A corrupted cogitator here, a demon-bound power source there, and suddenly your entire fleet is running on components touched by the warp. That's not sabotage, it's foundational decay. And that's probably why no one talks about it. Because if the rumors are true, if the Dark Mechanicum never left, just went deeper, then the people in charge know. They have to know. The Fabricator General, the High Lords, even certain Inquisitors. But how do you admit something like that? How do you tell the Imperium that the most sacred world in the cult Mechanicus is potentially housing cults that would tear reality open just to watch it bleed? You don't. You lock the vaults. You erase the files. You start a dozen small wars in other systems just to draw attention away from Mars. Anything to keep the lie going. Some fans believe that's exactly what's happening. That certain conflicts, especially the sudden confusing ones that spring up on seemingly irrelevant worlds, are smokescreens. Distractions orchestrated to divert Imperial attention from the true battle, the war beneath the red surface. A war that can't be seen, only sensed. Through anomalies, power surges, tech adepts going missing, or sudden restrictions on access to certain sectors of Martian infrastructure. They say the real war for the Imperium's soul isn't happening on Cadia or Armageddon. It's happening in the basements of the forges. And we're already losing. And if you think this is all just doom posting, consider how many systems rely directly on Martian oversight. Machine patterns are broadcast across the galaxy from Mars. Supply lines stretch from the Red Planet to 1,000 Forge worlds. If even a fraction of those systems are compromised, just a few corrupted schematics, a handful of tainted AI protocols, then the Dark Mechanicum isn't just surviving. It's expanding, invisible, unstoppable, like a virus embedded in the hardware of a dying empire. And we haven't even talked about morale. The Adeptus Mechanicus prides itself on loyalty, discipline, purity of thought. If it were proven, even in whispers, that the Dark Mechanicum still existed on Mars, what do you think would happen to that unity? Entire Forge worlds might declare independence. Skitarii units might begin questioning orders. Explorator fleets could vanish into deep space, refusing to report back. You'd see schisms worse than the original Heresy, not because of ideology, but because of doubt. And doubt is poison in a religion built on certainty. That's the real reason this threat is hidden, not because we don't know, but because we do. And acknowledging it would shake the Imperium to its core. It's easier to pretend the threat was defeated 10,000 years ago. Easier to chant the liturgies and trust the systems, even if they glitch sometimes. Easier to let the tech priests assure us everything is functioning within acceptable parameters, even when the parameters themselves have been rewritten. And yet, I get it. What's the alternative? If you really start digging into the implications, it gets bleak fast. If the Dark Mechanicum is still alive, still experimenting, still building, then we're not just dealing with a hidden faction. We're watching the slow, silent rebirth of a new technological era. One that doesn't care about the Imperium. One that may not even care about humanity. It wants progress, not survival. Ascendancy, not order. Some fans even speculate that the long game of the Dark Mechanicum isn't to destroy the Imperium with armies or demons, but to replace it, bit by bit. Replace our machines, our systems, our prayers. Until one day, the loyalist Mechanicus wakes up and realizes it's been speaking to the wrong god for centuries. And by then, it's already too late. So yeah, maybe it's all just theory. Maybe it's just paranoia layered over myth. But I don't think so. I think the truth is buried deep beneath the Martian crust, behind blast doors no longer listed in any map, in data vaults that hum with forbidden code. And I think the Imperium knows, but it can't afford to act. Not yet. Because if Mars truly falls, or if the truth about what's lurking under its surface ever gets out, then everything falls. So, after everything we've uncovered, everything we've speculated and feared, can we really say the war against the Dark Mechanicum was ever truly won? That's the question that lingers, the one that keeps me circling back to the same dark places in the lore. We act like the Heresy ended, that the traitors were either annihilated or fled into the Eye of Terror, never to return. But I look at Mars. I look at the patterns, the silences, the sealed vaults, and the things we're told not to ask about, and I just can't believe it's over. Not really. We built an Imperium on the ruins of ancient horrors and told ourselves we buried the past. But what if the past just went quiet? What if it learned, adapted, and dug itself in so deep that it became part of the very machine we rely on every day? Maybe the greatest trick the Dark Mechanicum ever pulled wasn't summoning demons or building engines of living steel. It was surviving, going to ground, becoming myth while still functioning in the shadows. I keep coming back to this one image of a mago standing at an altar, surrounded by incense and cogitators, performing the rites like any loyal servant of the Omnissiah. But beneath his red robes, there's a second layer, a hidden circuit, a sigil not found in any sanctioned scripture. And when no one is looking, he whispers a prayer meant not for the machine spirit, but for something else, something deeper, something waiting. That's what makes the idea of the Dark Mechanicum so terrifying. Not just that they're out there, but that they might be here, that they've been here all along. Maybe they're not building armies anymore, not in the way we imagine. Maybe they're rebuilding the world in their image, one piece at a time. A few corrupted blueprints, a few whispers in the new sphere, a few tech priests nudged toward innovation. Until one day we wake up, and nothing is as we remember it. And the most chilling part? Maybe that's already happened. If that's the case, then Mars isn't a forge world. It's a wound. A sacred world infected with an ancient heresy that we never truly cured, only cauterized, leaving it to fester beneath the surface. We walk on top of it, build on top of it, pray on top of it, all while pretending it's not there. But eventually, wounds reopen, especially if they were never really healed to begin with. That's where I want to leave this discussion, with a sense of unease, yes, but also curiosity. Because at the end of the day, that's what makes Warhammer so powerful. The mystery, the unanswered questions, the whispers behind the lore. And maybe, just maybe, the chance to look past the propaganda and wonder what's really going on beneath the layers of red dust and sanctified steel. So what do you think? Are there still pockets of the Dark Mechanicum beneath Mars? Are we already too far gone to stop them? Or are they just another ghost story told by paranoid tech adepts and late-night theorists like me? Let me know your theories in the comments. I want to hear the weird stuff, the obscure lore, the half-translated scrap code fragments you found buried in an old codex or fan archive. This topic is massive, and I know a lot of you have insights I haven't even touched on. And if you enjoy diving into this dark, hidden corner of the 40K universe, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next descent into madness. We've got more coming. More forbidden truths, more unexplored horrors, more questions the Imperium doesn't want you to ask. Because the galaxy is vast, and it's watching. And somewhere, deep beneath the crust of Mars, a machine is still dreaming, still humming with forbidden code, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, listening. If you've made it this far, thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of the most chilling mysteries in the Warhammer 40K universe. If this kind of lore exploration is your thing, where we peel back the layers and ask the questions the Imperium doesn't want asked, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next descent into the darkness. Share your thoughts in the comments, drop your wildest theories, and as always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and praise the Omnissiah, or whatever's pretending to be him.